So the plan for today is to make some little aluminum ingots for my nephews. So this is the mold, and I've got some quarters here. So I'm going to take one of these quarters because they melt at a quite high temperature and set it there in the middle and the bottom to give kind of a little coin impression there on the bottom. We'll try out the quarter later. I bought this little stand thing, so we'll be able to actually show the process. The little microphones that I bought. Let's see, how do I get this to? There we are. I need to charge those up, so you won't have commentary, but you'll be able to hopefully see what goes on here. Let's see here. Pause this. Okay, got this thing on here. Now, let's get the fire started. Starter. There we are, we got our fire started. Let's see how this looks. Alright. So I'm planning to make this exclusively out of aluminum cans. Thought that'd be kind of fun. So the next step is to get my safety gear on here. I don't know if you all can hear me at all, but welding gloves, face shield, and my new steel-toed boots, so protect me if I drop the metal onto my toes. I have spilled metal on the ground before, so it can happen. Move my fuel tank a little further away. Not that it would get hot there, but just to be on the safe side. The outside of the crucible rarely hits more than 150 degrees. So we're at the inside where the fire's coming out. It wouldn't surprise me if it's up to 1600. Let's see if I can check those temperatures. I left my temperature sensor inside. I'm going to go ahead and pause the video and go get that. Alright, so here's the temperature gun. You aim at whatever you want to measure. And, looks like the top of the furnace is running, well, the surface metal is 140 degrees. In the middle where the heat's coming up, it's coming up, or it's measuring down in there at close to 1200 degrees. So it's probably, well, what's interesting is to see what the temperature inside the crucible is, because the crucible started cold, and it takes quite a bit of heat for that crucible to, it absorbs quite a bit of heat. It takes a long time to cool, we heat up and a long time to cool down. So let's take a look at what's the temp in the crucible is. So it's measuring around 500 to 600 degrees from in the top and sides of the crucible. We need to get to around 1300 degrees before that aluminum starts to really melt down. It may be fairly hot down in there. As it gets hotter, it starts to weaken. So we might be able to push that can down fairly easily. Now it's still pretty solid. So I am curious the temp underneath that can, so I'm going to remove it here. So it hot enough to scorch it a bit, but not hot enough to seriously weaken it. Okay, that wasn't smart. I'll let the can touch me. If it was hot enough, I started feeling it through the welding gloves after carrying it for a while. So the gloves will handle really high temperatures. You can put them into 1300 degree temperatures, but only for a short period of time. Then they heat up, and as they heat up, the leather oils or whatever in the leather start to kind of burn, and it hardens the glove. So you don't want to do that. Yeah, 800 degrees at the bottom of the crucible. It's got about 500 degrees to go. Toss the lid back on to hopefully capture a little more of that heat. So I'm wearing a cotton shirt, so when that can touched against my shirt, it didn't, if you wore polyester, it may melt the polyester. So cotton is by far the clothing of choice for this kind of work, that or leather, right, to protect you from the temperature. A lot of guys wear like aprons, which is not a bad idea. If you're ever dealing with things that are hot, you really do need the proper protection. So this face mask in particular is critical. It's rare, but if you get a droplet of water in the bottom of your mold, that immediately goes to steam, and then explodes, and then would send showers of molten metal in all directions. So you very much want to protect your eyes from that. So anyway, it's heating up here. And I was thinking about pausing the camera, but now I'll let it go because you guys get an idea of how the experience is. It's actually kind of fun to just sort of be sitting here and watching the distortion from if you look just above the furnace, there's a little distortion there as heat's coming up and heating up the air and making kind of mirage-ish effect in the air. It's about 50, 60 degrees here. So let's see what that looks like now. And sure enough, the can is a crumpled pile in the bottom. So, not quite really molten, but it's getting there. Yeah, about 1200 degrees in the bottom. So, I'm going to stir it a bit just to see what it does. Yeah, it's this kind of flaky, kind of melted, but still sort of solid stuff. I'm going to throw another can in here. This time I'm going to leave the lid open and just sort of watch what happens. You really can do this just as good with the lid open as closed. Having the lid closed, I think, probably traps a bit more of the heat. But once it gets up to temp, it will continue to heat up beyond the temp you need. So you can do just fine with the lid open. I can't really turn the propane feed down much because you can hear the little, I don't know if it's picking up on the phone, but there's little bits of gap in the sound, which means it's right at the low end of what the setting would allow anyway. So anyway, it caught fire, the paint on top burned off, kind of fell down into the bottom. I'm smelling a bit of fumes from probably a combination of the paint, perhaps some aluminum oxide. So when things rust, it's a combination of the metal and oxygen. So of course you all have seen iron, rusted iron, right, where iron and oxygen combine to create the rust. With aluminum, that same thing happens. Now this specifically is to my nephews, the aluminum canoe that you guys have. You may notice this kind of a blackish film that forms on the canoe. That's aluminum oxide. When you heat up a metal, the molecules start moving back and forth very quickly. So they bump into more oxygen much more rapidly. So at high temperature, aluminum oxides rusts at extremely fast rates. So when I put a can in here and it melts down, as soon as that aluminum gets exposed to the oxygen, it starts to rust very, very quickly, forming that black, film. A lot of that just gets spit up in the smoke, whatever, air coming out of the furnace. So what you want to do is build a pool of molten material in the bottom of the furnace, and then as the cans melt, oh, that's got a little water in the bottom of it. You can hear it kind of sizzling there as it turned to steam. You know that hit 212 degrees at that point. But as that melts, you want to get the can down into the molten metal in the bottom of the crucible as fast as you can. Because the surface of the crucible kind of has a film on top of it of somewhat cooler, if you will, aluminum. And it is oxiding, but not at a super fast rate. And it's a relatively small surface area. Where the can itself is fairly large surface area, really thin, it's going to oxide very quickly. So if you want the most aluminum recovery from melting down your cans, you want to get the can down into that molten metal as fast as you can to minimize your surface area. It can make a significant difference in the amount of aluminum that you recover. So commercially, what they will do is collapse the aluminum together into these bricks. They smash it, and take as much air out of it as possible. Then they throw that into a crucible. You know, it goes down into the molten aluminum. They get very, very little loss in terms of oxidization. I could simulate the same effect by smashing these cans down. Have probably somewhat better success. But it's also really fun to see them melt down like this. Also, at first, the can's not hot enough to really be oxidizing anyway. So if you time it right, get it down into the metal, you still minimize your loss. So it all depends. If I'm wanting to kind of just sit back and chill, watch it melt down some cans, then I'll smash them up and you know, let them just sort of soak down on their own. And if I'm feeling like being more involved, I'll do this. These cans are given to me by a friend of ours. And that had some water in it, sizzled a bit. That was fun. So there's plastic on the inside of the can and paint on the outside. And both of those are going to burn off fairly quickly, probably where that little fire is coming from. I got a pool of aluminum, molten aluminum, forming in the bottom there, which is making it easier to push these cans down. I'm going to stand back a little further though. Don't care for the fumes. I like to stand upwind. That one has quite a bit of water in the middle. See this sort of whitish steam coming out the top. I'm going to try moving this a little closer. I don't want to melt nothing, but I'd like you to see down in there. Hopefully got this reasonably centered. So whenever I'm holding material that's going to go in there, I make it my practice to always be wearing my welding gloves. I mean, if I'm dropping it from way above, I really don't need to, but I don't want to ever get complacent and accidentally take my hand into 1,000-degree temperatures without having that protection. this might be fun. There's some fluid in that one. So as long as your water is coming in on top, and it's not a huge enough piece of water to get down into the metal, then you're okay. It'll just boil off. But yeah, see how weak that gets when it heats up? Oop, got some on the outside. So you do that little bit on the outside there. If it cooled down, it would look a lot like aluminum foil. So that's really what it is. So aluminum has interesting characteristics. I don't claim to even understand hardly any of them, but when it's cast, it kind of almost crystallizes and forms a fairly weak cast metal. I mean, it's strong enough to be used in car parts and things like that, but it's nowhere near the strength of steel. That said, so I'm taking a bit more risk here because the water in here is going to be trapped. So it may, yeah, little explosion there, right, as the steam broke loose and popped the can back up. If you can see that, it's going down into a little pool of molten metal there on the bottom. But the other characteristic about aluminum that's interesting is that it rolls really well. So you can compress it and roll it out, and for whatever reason, however the rolling process is done, it almost seems to strengthen the aluminum. So it's used a great deal in situations where you need to have a very thin and relatively strong layer of metal. Surfaces of airplanes, of course, aluminum foil, cans, very versatile metal in the environment where you're rolling things out. But like I said, it doesn't mean that cast aluminum is not useful either. Let me go show you a cast aluminum part. So these are a couple of car parts made of cast aluminum. The part here in the middle is steel, but the outside part is all cast aluminum. And if I took a sledgehammer to it, I could break that up. It's not that hard to break up, but it's plenty strong enough for its purpose in the car, and it's by volume much, much lighter. So this saying Honda, which suggests it's probably from a motorcycle, and you would definitely want to minimize your weight in that kind of situation. Bring over some more cans. This one's a V8 low sodium can. That was mine. No, it's not very tasty, but it's a healthy drink, and kind of enjoy it from time to time. I kind of like the bitterish flavor in it. And if you like the more sweet variety of things, there's Jumex here. That's really good stuff. That's about ready. So I should probably use my little stick here wherever I put it, over there. Well, it looks like I've got enough aluminum for probably a single ingot. There's some of the molten aluminum there. So, let me crush up a couple cans so you kind of how that would work. You get a lot more in there. It looks like my propane needs to be turned up a little bit. It's kind of sputtering there. Cranked it up a bit. Probably a little bit too much. Don't really need much heat. So I also made this little metal thing here. Fits on top of the crucible. What it allows me to do, if I smash up my cans, I can set kind of like a collection on top. Kind of leave them there to sort of preheat. Get soft. And then I can poke them down into the crucible below. So what that lets me do is just sort of sit back, relax, lay down the grass for a few minutes, wait for them to kind of get ready to melt, and stuff them down in the crucible and repeat it. So I'll go ahead and leave the camera running here, but if you want to skip ahead a little bit, feel free to. I'm just going to watch these cans melt down a bit. Alright, they may be getting hot enough. Maybe hot enough here to push them down in there. Well, not quite. A little bit. That one did anyway. So probably getting more oxidation out using this method because, again, there's more surface area being exposed to heat and oxygen. But it's the lazy way to melt some cans. Here's from some other friends of mine. Also got a pie sheet here. They melt that down a little later. Those melt down just fine too. So the reason the steel here is not a problem is it melts at like 3,000 degrees. The bottom of this furnace, we might be, you know, upwards of 2,000 degrees. So, and here at the top, they're probably, oh, I don't know, 1,100 maybe? Let's see what we got. Well, the cans are right around the 500 mark. So, down beneath, kind of hard to say, but I'm getting readings off the top of the crucible there around 1,400. Depending where I'm aiming. So that steel is, you know, 1,500 degrees away from the melting point. It's, you know, basically unaffected. It's at that temp, it's probably not even losing any strength. So, oh, there went that can. So I think I'm going to pull this back out. Whereas here I need to be, it's hot, so I'm going to set it over here on a brick. Let's see if you can, assuming you can see that. It'll cool off just a little bit. It'll cool off pretty fast. And yeah, it's cooled off pretty good. So the leaves and stuff are going to catch fire in the probably 400 degree range. So it's when it's not catching leaves on fire, you know, it's cooled off fairly good. I wouldn't want to touch it with my bare hands yet, but it's cooled off pretty good. So I'm thinking I want some time for the molds to what am I trying to say here? The mold material to, or the material in the mold to cool, because I want to do 3 of them, of course, for all 3 of you guys. So I think I may pour the first one now and then melt some more cans in. So what I'm doing right now is stirring this very surface. I don't really care to stir down in there. I don't want to really introduce air bubbles into the metal. But at the surface, we've got some floating slag, some iron oxide pieces, not iron oxide, aluminum oxide pieces that are there, residue from the paint that burned, residue from the plastic inside that burned. Because if soda cans aren't coated with plastic, a lot of the the soda inside is very acidic, and it would burn right through the side of the can. just absorb it and then spill out. And so that's why they're covered with plastic. In fact, you can do an experiment. If you take a Coke, open it up, put a nail inside it, the acid will absorb that nail, and it'll just completely disappear inside that can. Makes you wonder about drinking it, how good that is for you. But that said, you know, it's going down the stomach where there's acids there as well. So your body is used to acid, that's for sure. So it's probably one of those things that's not super good for you, but not super harmful either. But your dad could clarify that a lot more than me. So what I'm doing now is scooping out the dross. So the reason I stirred it was that there's aluminum. You can see some little pieces of that shiny material. Aluminum gets intermixed in the dross, but the aluminum is heavier than the dross. So if I stir it, it tends to break it up, and most of the aluminum then goes down into the molten metal, and so I have a lot less waste here. So I pour it out here on the ground to cool, and then periodically come and I'll scrape it up and take it and throw it in the trash. But you can see it's quite black. Probably, I'm gonna guess, a mix of carbon from the burned paint and so forth, and aluminum oxide, which is also black. And it's a powder kind of material. I'm scooping up a little more aluminum than I care for, but that's okay. Oh, see, I got a whole little piece of aluminum there, but I'm close to being able to pour this. All right, set this down here. Let's rotate this so hopefully you all can see what I'm doing. Tilt this up a little bit. So this holds the material. So that got it out. I set it on that little brick there, because if I set it in the grass, it'll just catch the grass on fire. So I'm tapping it there. I'm tapping it because it tends to want to bulge up in the middle originally. Kind of like if you take a droplet of water, you know, and set it on a counter, that water will, you know, has this kind of surface tension. Well, aluminum very much has the same characteristic. So tapping it there allowed it to kind of flatten out, and so we'll get a roughly flattish ingot. Now what's going to happen is as it cools, it will shrink, and so the top the sides won't shrink in because they're sort of stuck against the side, and it's not easy for them to shrink in. The top, however, gravity will pull it down. There's free air up above it to pull it down. So it's going to kind of sink in the middle. You'll have this kind of little dip in the middle, even though it started with kind of a flat surface. But otherwise, if I hadn't tapped it, it would have kind of like a bread loaf surface with the dips in the middle, like the bread loaf collapsed, you know, if you've ever baked bread. So anyway, then you can take it and sort of grind it and polish it off flat if you want to. I'll probably polish these a little bit, but leave the original shape so you all can kind of see how the metal acts. So we still got a good pool of melted aluminum in here. Stick it back in the furnace. Let's rotate this back so you can see the furnace here. And then continue tossing some more cans in here. I think I have enough for about one more ingot. Of course, I want 3. So oh, that one's got a lot of water in it. See all that white steam coming out? Along with some of the smoke. Yeah, these are pretty new. Got these from another friend of mine. When you start doing this and start asking your friends, they'll start collecting cans for you. It's kind of fun. So the crucible is made out of a mix of graphite, clay, and some other materials that I'm not so familiar with. As you use it, it does wear out. I probably used this 20 times, and you can see it's starting to show wear. So they're not indestructible, but they're pretty amazing. The mold I have is out of basically pure graphite. That's seems to be a lot less likely to wear down. It's much more resistant to wear. Of course, the crucible does get a lot more wear than the mold gets. So I expect the mold to last me a long, long, long time. So I have a couple more crucibles. Eventually, this one may wear out. Who knows? Really don't know how long it'll last. Let's see what else I've got over there. Here's some more cans from a friend of mine. These are kind of fun because they're bright red. So, I myself don't drink caffeinated drinks. Yeah, don't care for the effect on the heart. Not to speak of the disruption to sleep cycles. But I certainly don't mind melting somebody's cans for someone who does drink it. It's not an endorsement of the product. It's just making use of the metal that's in them. So I definitely support. Oh, the water in there heated up and it created a little bit of pressure and it popped that can out. I definitely support recycling. This is really probably not the best recycling because we are losing a portion of this to aluminum oxide, where a professional organization wouldn't. But I very much support any form of recycling. There's no point to pull something out of the ground, use it once, and stick it back in the ground. If you can effectively break it down and then reuse it for something else, that's a good use of the resources God gave us. He gave man the responsibility to be the steward of the earth. I'm not saying, there's people who take things to extremes. People who politicize the caring for the environment. I don't really care for that. I don't really think it should be a political issue. It's just something we should do. Oh, it's kind of fun. I feel some heat in my gloves. I'll probably need to let them cool a bit. I like to get in there a little much, and yeah, I'm probably going to wear these gloves out before their time. Yeah. They weren't that expensive, about $18. I really love them. They're really nice. But still, there's no point to, again, taking use of the resources God gives us. There's no point to not take care of them, That's fun. Pop, pop, pop. So I have to be a little bit careful because I don't want to shove fluid down into my molten aluminum down there, but the fluid's inside the can. The can is a little bit cooler, hasn't melted yet, so even if I push it down, the explosion's going to come up in the middle of the can rather than in the middle of the molten material. So I'm very unlikely to create flying molten aluminum. So I wonder if this got this bag is empty. So I'll do that before I do the next pour. Let's melt down the pipe blade. This will be fun. Oh, it's got some aluminum foil on the outside. I'm going to make a ball of that. Drop that in there. Let me poke it a bit. It disappear down into the molten mess. There it is, covered with molten aluminum. Hope y'all can see it. And it's still there, but it's coming apart. A little bit kind of a frothy consistency there because probably all the air that was trapped in it. So probably not the best thing to do to get. You want to avoid air getting trapped in your aluminum because that can create bubbles and things in your pour. But that was fun. Okay, so now we need to do the pie plate. Oh, set that in the grass and it caught on fire. It'd be fun with some of these kind of things, because as what was in the pie, the stuff stuck to it, burns off, you get this smell of like cooking / burning food along with it. Oh, that's going to fall over. And the little cat food cans are made out of aluminum, a lot of them. Some are steel, some are aluminum. Anyway, when you put those on, you get this burning meat smell coming off of them, which is kind of fun. So you can see how it just got brittle and weak as it heated up. It just collapses into the pile of metal there. So I think I need to stir a bit. The surface is looking a little bit like some dross there that I probably need to pull off. The more you stir the surface, the better separation you get with the dross and the metal. Dross does like to stick to the very edge. That's what is that? I better go check that out. Well, that was fun. Fire alarm in my son's room was going off. Not a whiff of smoke anywhere. Sometimes you get a little spider or some sort of animal that creates silk, and that will float into the fire alarm and fool it into thinking that, man, there's a pile of smoke here because I can't see through this sticky silk. And then your fire alarm will just start going off. If that happens, that fire alarm is toast, because that material will never come out of there. You just got to throw it away and replace it. So maybe that happened. I really don't know. We'll see. I'll turn it back on again if it'll keep going or not. But so the surface there is getting nice and kind of broken up, almost to the point where I'm ready to start scooping it out. There's still little clumps of aluminum in it. Not sure they're big enough to be worth spending much more time stirring. So I made the mistake once of going, hey, it'd be a lot easier when I'm pulling this dross out if I just pour it over the edge of the crucible in the bottom of the furnace and pour it out later. Problem is that created some heat differentials in the bottom of the furnace, and it cracked and kind of broke up the little firestone piece that the crucible sits on. Not bad enough that I'd have to throw it away and get a new one, but enough to warn me that that's not a good idea. You gotta pull the dross all the way out. All right, I think that's good enough. So now it's time to pop the old one out. There you are. That looks rather nice. Oh, I meant to put heads down. That's a tail side on that one, which is actually kind of a nice image. I think it's going to turn out nicely. Gotta be careful there. The mold's quite hot. I could feel it with my finger. It'd burn me if I touched it bare finger. Oh, sorry, you probably couldn't hear that. It'd burn me if I touched it directly. So, all right, time to pull it out. Let's do the next pour. Turn this over here. Oh, come on. Rip. Here. Use my spoon. Didn't quite get to flattening that one immediately. There's kind of rounded corners there, but it's kind of flat and done. So, you know, variation. It's kind of, every time you do it, it's going to turn out a little bit different. Be kind of interesting. So it doesn't freeze up. Let's put the rest back in there. Let's see what I got. Almost enough for another ingot. Not quite. So, got some more cans over there. Figured I'd have just about enough cans of this stuff to do these 3 ingots. I got some more cans over in the garage area, but I have to dig them out. And these days I'm starting to melt more and more things that aren't cans. Old aluminum dishes. Got those car parts there. Those have a lot more aluminum in them than the cans do. But the cans are definitely, from a visual standpoint, they're a lot more interesting. Yeah, it's pretty hot down there. Doesn't take much pushing down, and the whole can just melts right into that pool of molten aluminum at the bottom. And it's heating that liquid in there at a boiling point quite quickly. steam explosion there. So this rod that I'm poking down here, it looks like it's a brass, but that's just paint. It's actually steel. Kind of a soft steel, allowed me to bend it, make it into a nice little tool. Came from a scrap of some sort of decorative thing that I bought at the Samaritan Center for, I don't know, 65 cents or something. Repurposed. I was hoping that it was brass, but it's not. I should have taken a magnet with me when I was shopping there, but I forgot to do so. So magnets won't pick up stainless steel, but stainless is pretty rare. It's fairly expensive, so most of the time we have steel being used and it's just covered by a paint or something to prevent rust from taking place. And magnets will pick that up and be able to very easily tell what's steel and what's not. If you remember to bring it, which I have yet to remember. So the top, getting a little sludgy there. It's a mix of dross and aluminum. It had a lot of water in it. That's fun. All right. Well, one of these days, I'll melt this guy down. It's a little aluminum piece. Here's some of my old cans that I collected over several years. I was going to sell them off for, scrap material, but then the local scrap dealer went out of business, so they were just sitting there. And I started doing this, and I'm like, wow, I'm glad I've got a big old collection of aluminum cans to melt down. And of course, they're all smashed up, so not quite as pretty to see melt down as the others. But they turned to aluminum like everything else. So I think this might be ready to remove. Oh, what was I thinking? I did that one tails too. It's okay. I think the tails graphic is probably better, so I'm going to keep the pattern. Because of course, you put it heads down, that means that's not the side that's showing. It's going to be what's here. So, but it's a cool eagle. So let's do that again on this. I'm going to position that with my welding gloves. That's way too hot to mess with. There we are, ready for our third and final pour. That's get the dross out. So the top was very putty-like, but as I mix it here, it's turning darker and darker as I break apart the dross material from the aluminum, and the aluminum drops down into the molten metal below. So it's still a fair amount of aluminum trapped in that dross, but a whole lot less than there was 20 seconds ago. And I'm not stirring the metal, I'm just barely down in there and stirring the dross. So it'd be interesting to make some sort of a fork-like device, because that should break it up faster than a single tip here. So you can break it up with a spoon, going back and forth, but there's a tendency that you pick up the surface of the metal doing that. So I generally avoid stirring with the spoon anymore once I got the stirring stick. Some aluminum there. I may come back through this dross later and pull out some of the little pieces of aluminum and toss them back in to be melted on a future melt. All right, that looks good. I'm going to go ahead and just turn off the furnace because we're done with that. All right, furnace is off and disconnected from the propane. So let's pull up our last pour's worth. I don't know if you can hear me, but anyway, and let's pour it out. So that's the molten metal. So a little delay there getting to the whacking on it. So the edges are all kind of rounded, but I actually kind of like that effect. So it's might have to kind of experiment with determining how long to wait to get either a very squarish bar, rectangular-ish, or whether to get more of a rounded edges like that one. So we got three kind of slightly different bars here. Very similar, but slight differences, so that's kind of fun. And so now, time to just wait on that. Time to start putting stuff away. I always got to put stuff away. So what I do, oh, that's still got a bunch of molten aluminum in it. I don't really want to leave it at the bottom of the crucible because it starts building up like a dross layer on the side. That becomes a real nuisance. So what you got to do with this is just find a place to pour it out, and reuse it somewhere else. Might be fun right here. we are. So there's some gunk in the bottom that I'll scrape out before I do the next pour. I didn't expect that to run quite as long. I would have preferred it not run there on the grass, but that's okay. So the key is not to step on it. I don't want to damage the soles of the shoe. So anyway, I just throw that back in there. Throw the lid on. Over the next probably 3 hours or so, it'll slowly cool off. Then I'll come back here at some other time and put the furnace away. And now it's time to pick up the tools. And again, avoid stepping on that molten aluminum. Aluminum supply, a lot more over there for the next melt. Well, that's reading in at like 200 degrees still. I don't know if that's accurate. So, still wouldn't want to step on it. It might melt the plastic on the shoes. But anyway, one last thing. Let's pull this one out. There we are, 3 aluminum ingots, melted out of a bunch of aluminum cans and a couple of pie plates, or maybe 1 pie plate actually. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed that, and Merry Christmas, guys. Love you all. Bye.